Hello and welcome to GNN, a weekly Fallout-themed podcast brought to you by Shoddycast, makers of Hidden History and Fallout Lore, the Storyteller. I'm your host, Charles Battersby, and with me is my co-host,
Austin Horrigan.
In a minute, we're going to talk about the new update to Fallout Shelter and the Android version of Fallout Shelter, but first we want to tell you about a giveaway contest that we're having with our new partners at video games Amino. Amino is a new social networking app, and there is a special video game section on it. If you download Video Games Amino and then follow Shoddycast there, you'll be eligible to win one of 3 pre-orders of the Fallout Anthology. So the Fallout Anthology, we've spoken about that in previous episodes. That's the one that has the first 5 Fallout games in a mini nuke-shaped container. So it's Fallout 1, 2, Tactics, 3 with all its DLC, and New Vegas with all its DLC. And to be eligible for the giveaway, you need to make an account on Video Games Amino and then follow Shoddycast. You can just do a simple search for us, and you should find us. And also, I'm on there with my real name, Charles Battersby, if you want to follow me as well. But that doesn't get you any bonus points for the contest.
And they have a whole bunch of different sections other than just video games. They have some dedicated to indie games. They have some dedicated to certain franchises like League of Legends and I believe Minecraft. It's basically a mobile platform where you can host your own blog and share stuff that you think is really cool with people who think the same things are cool, and they have very different. They cater to a whole bunch of different fandoms, including cosplay is one of them as well.
Yes, I'm on the cosplay section as well under Charles Battersby. And there's also sections of it for specific genres of gaming. So there's a MMO section and a first-person shooter section. And then there's stuff that's not entirely nerdy, but that people still get obsessed about. There's a Taylor Swift section for the Swifties. And Austin, you were talking about the Bollywood section.
So remember, if you want to be eligible for the Fallout Anthology pre-order giveaway, you have to go and download the Video Games Amino app. It is on Android, on Google Play, and also for iOS, and you have to follow Shoddycast.
All right, and in other Fallout-related appiness, Fallout Shelter has finally come to Android, and those of us who've been playing it on iOS, we've got a bunch of additional content. So, Austin, before we talk about the Death Claws and Mr. Handy, what do you think of Fallout Shelter on your Android?
Finally, I've gotten the opportunity to play it. It is... Well, it does not cater to some. I've noticed that. I can see that there are some people who think that it is not worth all the hype, which can often be the case for anything that has a lot of hype. You know, there's the hype bar can go way above the technological ability to make something, but I really like it. I like that there's a mix of... There's one thing that I've learned while playing it the past week. It kind of deceives you because there's not a lot of pressure. You don't have to check it a bunch. You don't have to like worry if you're busy for a day and you don't. It's not a Tamagotchi. It's going to starve to death. But you have to be careful just because there's no pressure to check it. That sometimes when you check it, a whole bunch of crap is going to go on, and you can't do it when you're like sort of distracted. You can't take that low pressure of the general experience as an indication. Because I was having a conversation with someone, and the conversation was reaching a little bit of a lull. But I was like, they were going off to get a drink of water, but it was dwindling. And I was like, oh, I'll check my vault. It's no big deal. And freaking mole rats bust out of the ground, and in a room where I don't have anybody. And if you have a disaster happen in a room where there isn't somebody in it, it's more likely to spread to many rooms in your vault. And I basically ended up with like 20 dead vault people because I tried to play while distracted.
Oh, I was trying to reach the maximum population of 200 people, and I didn't have enough food or water, to really feed them all. So everybody was, like no health because they all had radiation poisoning and no food. And then the rad roaches came. And I lost, I would say, over 100 people in that rad roach attack. And at that point in my playthrough, I didn't know that if you don't resurrect people within a certain time period, they're dead forever. So for those of you who haven't figured that out yet, yeah, you don't want to have a situation where, rad roaches or death claws kill, 100 of your people, and then you're like, I'll deal with it tomorrow.
As far as how the game feels, It's the kind of game, and part of it was me learning how to play, or the game teaching me how it was meant to be played. I kind of thought that it was the kind of game that if I sat there, there'd always be stuff to do. And it can be kind of a boring game if you want to sit there and stare at it for a while, because it can just become very... It's more of a game for doing a few things and leaving and then coming back and doing some more stuff. It's really not a sit there and engage with it a whole bunch. Even when... And I'm only at 40 Vault Dweller, so I know that it probably gets more complex as you get along. But the actual gameplay can feel a little unengaging to some people, I think. So that's something to know going into it, that it has some pacing issues. Maybe they're not issues, but they're definitely, there needs to be a caveat.
Yeah, I think the hype meter for Android players is way higher than it was for us on Android, because we were all watching live on the E3, and then Todd Howard says, "Oh, by the way, we got this thing, and you can download it as soon as I'm talking," and then we're all there just hitting the refresh button, and it's like oh man, it's been 25 whole minutes and I haven't played the thing yet. So we had an hour of hype before we got to do it, and you guys have had months of enviously seeing our screenshots.
Now, I've been a little nervous about aggressively expanding, because I saw a little tip when I was loading. It said, yeah, if you build a radio station, it makes it more likely for Deathclaws to come. I was like, well, I guess I'm not building a radio station then.
Well, I'll just say this, for if you want to build a radio station, that's awesome. If give your characters with high charisma something to do. But in general, just old-fashioned breeding is the way to build your population, and you will also get lots of people in your Vault-Tec lunchboxes as well.
Now, we can't talk about the Android release of Fallout Shelter without talking about the bugs that have been happening. Now, or really one major bug that's been happening, one experience ruining, life tear-inducing bug, which I guess what happens is if you are playing and your phone dies, which it's a battery suck, so that's actually something that could happen. It can corrupt your save file and make your game unplayable. It can also make it so that your game will just crash a whole bunch over and over again. So it's not an unserious bug, considering that they have a financial model that the way they make money is you pay for these lunch boxes. And I mean, what do you do if you pay for like 10 to 20 lunch boxes and then your save file gets corrupted by a bug that erased your game? And I bought some lunch boxes. I would be sad if that happened. So it's actually pretty serious, and it hasn't, as of recording this, it hasn't been dealt with yet. So if you're an Android user, I would recommend making sure your phone is charged. I've personally not had a single crash at all. Of any kind, but I have a little bit of a more modern phone, and Android is a really diverse landscape compared to iOS, so kind of not surprised to hear there are some crashing issues, but I know some people had crashing issues on iOS. Most of those people were talking about they had it on an operating system that was older. Not everyone, but many people. But iOS is a lot more of a controlled environment than Android is. It's kind of the nature of the beast. So,
and also for those of us who've been playing it on iOS for a long time, there are some new updates. The Deathclaws are new, and they're like Raiders, but much worse. I kind of reached a point where when you enter my vault, I posted this on Twitter. You enter my vault, and there's nothing on the first floor except the first chamber. Then the Raiders have to go down one level, and then there's a very large power generator. Everybody there is a soldier with really large weapons, so Raiders would come right in, and there's only one room they can go to, and they get killed. And it had been weeks, maybe over a month, since I actually had anyone survive that first room. Then of course the Deathclaws show up, and they trash the first room that I have, and drop down to the next room and trash that room. So they're a lot tougher than the Raiders. So it's a fun addition, and it does make you think a little more tactically about how you spread out your vault. I kind of planned ahead when I built my second vault. So it's very linear. The villains come in, you know, they aren't going to go through and like backtrack from room to room on the first floor, then go down and backtrack back and forth through the second floor. They have to go through a very specific winding labyrinth that I've created, and you know that has heavily armed people in those first couple rooms, and that worked great. But with the death claws, I had to up my game a little bit and ensure that there's more people with better weapons in those rooms. And of course, they've also changed their business model a little bit. Now you can purchase a Mr. Handy. I sprung the bucks and I got a Mr. Handy right when it came out. And the way that Mr. Handy works is, you know, he'll putter around, but you can assign him to one specific room. And if you're actively playing, he will go into that room as soon as it's ready to be harvested and harvest whatever's there. All right, now we're going to do a recurring segment called the Mod Spotlight. About a month ago, we spoke about how Fallout 4's controls are going to be more like a traditional first-person shooter or action game. And when we said that, a lot of people immediately said, hey, play Project Nevada, dumbass. In our defense, we did mention the Fallout Wanderers Edition, and the same team that made Fallout Wanderers Edition went on to do Project Nevada. And this game adds in some of the traditional controls that you'll see in an action game. There's a sprint button, there's a bullet time button, a dedicated grenade key. You get different kinds of Sam Fisher vision, depending on what kind of armor or helmet that you're wearing. So, Austin, you've been using this a lot. So what is your experience been with Project Nevada?
It's a vast improvement to all the mechanics of Fallout New Vegas. I mean, like you said, it adds sprints, it adds grenade, it adds a feature that I've never actually quite been able to get to work, where you can use explosives to open locks. I usually end up blowing myself up, so I clearly have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, actually, they've explained that in some of the more recent updates where, you know, I guess people were asking about it. And it's not that you walk up to the lock and do something, it's just that if an explosion goes off near a locked thing, then it might blow open without you having to actually do anything.
I actually uninstalled it because I've been streaming Dust occasionally for Shoddycast on the Twitch channel, and the great thing about Project Nevada, that the reason I actually uninstalled it is just because it allows you to tweak all of the mechanics of the game, like the damage and how much health you have and the rate of your hunger and all that. And the reason I uninstalled it for Dust is because it totally overwrote all the Dust presets, and I didn't want to bother reinstalling them. But it gives you a lot of ability to tweak your experience more to your liking. And I really do recommend it for people who have played New Vegas a bunch. The sprint feature is really nice. It adds more perks too. It makes it feel like a more modern game. And I can't help but feel that seeing those features added in Project Nevada somehow informed at least a little bit the things that they've done they're going to be doing in Fallout 4. With I know that they had sprinting in Skyrim, but it's just hard to not see the parallels. You know what I'm saying?
And it comes with a little mini quest too. I Dream of Electric Sheep, where you get cybernetic implants and you can go around the wasteland and different doctors can perform cybernetic augmentations on you, and you have a quest to find training manuals to teach the doctors how to do this.
You can find it on the Nexus, just like you can find almost all mods, except for some of those really horrific mods. And I highly recommend it for any PC user who has a little bit more. It takes a little bit more resources. I found on a less powerful computer, it can do some frame rate dropping, which is another reason why I ditched it for streaming. But you can find it on Nexus if you just search for Project Nevada. In fact, you could probably just go to the New Vegas sub page of the Nexus, and it's probably one of the top ones because it's so popular, and it'll really make the game feel more. It puts some Botox into the game.
All right, and last week we had Courtney Taylor, the voice actress that does the female lead in Fallout 4, and one of the things we spoke about with her was that there's not a whole lot of classic post-apocalyptic movies that are led by a female protagonist. And I've looked over all the awesome movies, or movies that I thought were awesome back when they came out in the 80s and 90s, and found a few that do have female leads, and we're going to talk about the ones that I think did have a significant impact on the development of Fallout. movies that were made in the late 80s, early 90s, probably around the time that the gang from Interplay were young guys, soaking up popular culture and then looking for things to, do with a game. And so something that I'm 100% positive influenced Fallout is a movie from 1992 called Tank Girl.
Yes!
Which, despite being a mediocre movie, still has a huge cult following. All right, so Tank Girl, the movie, is a loose adaptation of Tank Girl comics. The comic books were, very farcical, non-linear, absurdist, post-apocalyptic world. They did not take themselves seriously at all, even within, their own, month-to-month publication. So the movie was an attempt to take all of the interesting things about the Tank Girl comics and put it into a coherent storyline. So Austin, what did you think of the movie?
Oh boy, the movie is not very good by objective standards. To be entirely honest, it's I feel the way I feel about Hook is the way I feel about Tank Girl. I find it very charming. I like visual elements. I like certain aspects of it, but really, it's a bad movie. It really is. Like, if you're being entirely honest, it's trying to be irreverent like the comics are, but it just ends up being like a bunch of people trying to be irreverent, and it doesn't translate very well. But it's still kind of I would still recommend seeing it because it's a classic, and you can watch it and roll your eyes with other people. And then there are elements in there that are still worth it, and the costumes are fantastic. Like, that's a part of the movie that's awesome. The costuming and makeup is amazing. It's a post-apocalyptic world, kind of for the most part devoid of water, and it's set in Australia. And if you have seen Raiders in Fallout, that's basically standard operating procedure for outfits in Tank Girl.
And there are several very direct references to Tank Girl in Fallout. First, Malcolm McDowell is the voice of the villain in Fallout 3, and he plays a very similar character in Tank Girl, where he's the leader of the Water and Power Corporation. And so it's surprising at just how close the premises of Malcolm McDowell and his evil army of henchmen are trying to control all the water in the wasteland applies to both the movie and to the game.
And of course, there is the bombshell armor from the Pit add-on is probably the most direct reference visually.
Alright, so the bombshell armor is an unlockable item that you can get in the DLC The Pit, and you have to really earn it. There's this quest where you're sent out to go behind the steel mill and recover lost ingots of steel, and the quest is completed when you just find a few of those, but you can then go out, and each time you bring back more steel, you get more and more rewards. And then one of the rewards that you get is the bombshell armor. So this is one of those pieces of clothing in Fallout 3 where what it looks like depends on what gender your character is. So if you're a man, you get this, just post-apocalyptic raggy armor. But if you're a woman, it's a bra where the cups are made out of the tips of nuclear warheads. They look like the mini nukes in Fallout 3. But this is a direct reference to a nuclear missile bra that was used in Tank Girl the movie, and was also in a lot of the Tank Girl comics. So this is one of those things where you know for a fact that somebody working at Bethesda was a big fan of Tank Girl and wrote this in deliberately.
And our final movie is Cherry 2000, and I've seen the notes, and I think he probably saved it for last because it has probably the most elements in common with the more recent Fallout game.
Yeah, this one, it's definitely on the list of movies that the developers must have watched as research. So Cherry 2000 was made in the late 80s. It stars a very young Melanie Griffith as the least menacing wasteland apocalyptic survivor you'll ever meet. It also has a tiny little role from a young fellow named Larry Fishburne, back when Lawrence Fishburne was going by Larry.
That just makes me uncomfortable to hear.
Oh yeah, he was Larry in a bunch of projects, so it's fun to check out his work from the 80s and see young Larry as a sex lawyer in Cherry 2000. And because it's the 80s, you know, it was very, you know, that yuppie attitude of we've all got to, you know, go to the nightclub in our big shouldered suits, and then we have our lawyers look up the sex contract. So it's crammed full of that. And there's also a bunch of hey, it's that guy actors in it. Brian James, who was the henchman actor who's been killed by every action movie star in Hollywood. And Tim Thomerson, those of you who love your low-budget action science fiction movies will recognize Tim Thomerson as Jack Death, who was the time-traveling cop from the...
Stupidest name ever.
Sorry, I'm laughing too much to say it out loud. He plays the villain in this. He does a terrific job. He's one of those actors that, you know, he can do comedy, he can do action, he can do horror, and he can, you know, do these very flamboyant villains that, you know, it's very serious within the confines of the storyline, but the audience, you know, is just having a lot of fun watching him ham it up. So, you know, Cherry 2000 is just crammed full of, you know, hey, it's that guy. But it's not really such a good movie. The premise behind it is the main character is madly in love with his android sex bot. So first, that's just I'm positive that Fallout 4 is going to have references to Cherry 2000 in some way, just because they're going to have androids, and there will definitely be a robot sex bot subplot somewhere in Fallout 4. So he's madly in love with his robot, Cherry 2000, and because it's the 80s, 2000 means futuristic. That was just a hallmark of 70s and 80s science fiction, that the distant year 2000 will have robot wives. So, you know, he's in love with his robot sex bot, and she malfunctions, and now the only place where he can get a replacement sex bot is by going to the post-apocalyptic ruins of Las Vegas. And so the main character has to hire Melanie Griffith, of all people, to be the grizzled road warrior that drives him into, you know, Zone 7, the apocalyptic hellhole, and recover his sex bot. All right, and now let's have some viewer questions. Austin Martinez, at AustinMTZ98. I just beat Fallout 3 on my first playthrough without dying. Yes! So this isn't
applauding him.
Yeah, so that's not really a question, but it's really cool that you got through the game without dying your first time. It's always cool to see people, you know, master the mechanics, and so if you're listening and you've managed to do something really awesome in the game, send us a tweet or a comment about it, and maybe we'll mention it on the show.
I have to say the actual main quest line is actually not that hard, but once you start interacting with the higher level, the ghouls that were added with the Broken Steel add-on are just incredibly tough and difficult to kill. It's if you start doing the Broken Steel quest, there's an area where you have to go through them, and unless you have a certain item, I can just say it. If you can figure out how to find it, folks. The ghoul mask is my favorite piece of equipment for that part, because I mean, people say you could use the railway spikes to make it easier, but I just hate those dang ghouls. Oh, they are tough. They're tough. And of course, Mothership Zeta is just a nonstop kick in the pants when it comes to difficulty. I swear to God, that is the most unbalanced DLC I've ever played in my life.
Yes, those energy shields. You can one-shot kill almost everything you meet unless they turn on their energy shields, and then they're unstoppable. So Captain Manchild asks, you get to visit your Fallout shelter in Fallout 4. Thoughts? Okay, so now I think at first this might be an irrational speculation, but as I think about it, this is a little closer to a perfectly reasonable speculation. Because, you know, every room in your Fallout shelter, you know, vault, you know, it's just composed of a very simple premise of, you know, this room, it's 3 sections wide and, you know, 1 to 3 sections deep. So I think that it would be pretty easy to have some kind of script that just automatically generates a simple vault based on the premises of what you've created in Fallout Shelter. But you seemed really excited about something. What do you think?
Well, I was just thinking that, like, it could be workable as perhaps if they introduced a vault that was empty and had not worked out too well, and you'd get to find like the different named characters that you like, their skeletons or something like that. I think finding an actual vault that has actual people in it would be unlikely, but it would be really cool if they had little nods to your Fallout shelter. I think that could at least be done.
And they were all killed by rad roaches. Conspicuously tough rad roaches. All right, so now that kind of lends into perfectly reasonable speculations. Thomas at Claude Liberty 84 writes, the main protagonist finds out they have relations alive after the war. So I think this is a terrific idea for a storyline. I think someone else had suggested that you meet a companion character that's actually one of your descendants. So I think this is a perfectly reasonable speculation and a really damn cool idea for a storyline.
If they did that without making a reference to Fry from Futurama, I'd be very disappointed. Good news, everyone!
So yes, I think that Claude Liberty 84 is really onto something, and I certainly hope Bethesda has already thought of this and is actively working on it and dropping in the Futurama reference. And if not, maybe in a DLC pack, we'll meet a character like that. We're going to slowly transition into irresponsible speculations with this one. Okay, Ben Out 4 at Fallout PIS writes, Todd Howard will be a companion. So this straddles perfectly reasonable with irresponsible, because it's a long tradition in the Fallout games to have developer cameos. That, there's the Fargo traders, that's a reference to Brian Fargo. There's, Chris Avallone is a character in like 3 of the Fallout games. There's a character named Fergus in the very first village in Fallout 2. So yeah, I would not be at all surprised if the developers put in little developer cameos at some point in Fallout 4. What do you think?
Todd Howard would be a weird one. But I want it. I want it so bad. That needs to be modded. And they can take like clips from the E3 conferences and stuff and just hodgepodge awkward sentences that are of varying degrees of audio quality.
Well, now, speaking of that, it's actually pretty common for games to have these, developer commentary tracks in their games. But that's mostly like a linear shooter where it's very controlled where the player is going to go. And usually the way they work is you go to a location and, like as soon as you walk in the door, there's a big icon and you click on it and then you get an audio track from the developers. But if you had a companion that followed you everywhere, as soon as you get into each little town, there is Todd Howard, ready to tell you what the developers did to create that.
So he'd be like the storyteller in the storyteller mod that we have.
Oh yeah,
where he would have different regional triggers to stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, I remember building this. This was a pain in the butt. Couldn't get all the meshes to work right.
All right, so I think that definitely borders the line between irresponsible and perfectly reasonable speculations. All right, and now for our irresponsible speculation. Brett Osborne, Brett Ozzy on Twitter, writes, will there be Kazakhlaws?
Boo. Oh. That just... there's nothing right about that.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, the Cazadors are the giant, fast-moving, flying, poisonous bugs that you meet in New Vegas. So a Kazaklaw would be a fast-moving, poisonous deathclaw that can fly.
I'm gonna have nightmares about that tonight. I hope he knows that.
All right, so next week on GNN, we're going to have a special guest. Brian T. Delaney, who voices the male protagonist in Fallout 4, is going to join us.
He's super, super awesome, and it's going to be a romping good time. So if you liked the interview with Courtney Taylor, you need to stick it out for him, because he's a very vivacious and verbose character in real life.
And also on GNN, every Friday, there's new episodes of Fallout Lore the Storyteller, new episodes of GNN every Thursday, and new episodes of Hidden History. And don't forget, Shoddycast is holding a giveaway contest with our new partners at Video Games Amino. We're going to be giving away 3 copies of the Fallout Anthology pre-order. That's all the first 5 games, all their DLC in the mini nuke container. And if you want to be eligible for this contest, you need to download Video Games Amino on iOS or Google Play for your Android phone, and you will find Shoddycast. If you follow us there, you'll be in the contest. All right, and join us again next week with special guest Brian T. Delaney, who will say, "Let's go, pal," multiple times.